Hi YouTube, welcome to another edition of Horror Hands, and for this video I'm going to go through 5 horror films that were listed as video nasties that I don't think deserve the title. I don't think they deserve to be on the video nasties list. And that's not because they were bad horror films, quite the opposite. I think these films had more merit and more about them than just being labelled as a video nasty, which was essentially a list of very sort of trashy, sleazy horror films which at the time were deemed to be so offensive and violent that they would corrupt the mind of the UK population. That's kind of ridiculous now anyway, but these 5 films in particular I think had more going on than just mindless horror. So the first film on my list is Axe, which is kind of presented as sort of like a grindhouse regional horror film, something in the same vein as like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's actually quite a slow burn, rather quiet little film about this young girl. I think she's a mute, and she lives in this big farmhouse with her granddad. He's confined to this chair; he can't move, and these 3 guys who are on the run, I think they've done a bank robbery or something, but these sort of 3 violent men, they sort of muscle their way in and kind of hide out in the farmhouse, and they kind of bully and humiliate this young girl who lives there, but she in turn turns the tables on them and starts killing them off. Sounds quite lurid, but as I say, it's a rather sort of slow-paced film. A very interesting movie. It's surprisingly well made and has quite an effective sombre mood to it. So very different from kind of the in-your-face mindless violence that the label of a video nasty might paint upon this film. I don't think it'll be for everyone, but I personally really enjoyed that kind of slow-paced and quiet regional atmosphere that this one has. So that is the first one on my list. Okay, the next film is Cannibal Man, which has fantastic artwork. I mean, if you look at this artwork here, there's no prizes for guessing why this one was seized as a video nasty. I think this does take place in the film, but the film itself is actually much more of a slow-paced character study of this guy, kind of an unfortunate guy really. He gets into an altercation with someone, he ends up killing them, and then he's trying to cover his tracks and hide the body, and he in turn has to kill other people that happen across what he's doing. So he just gets himself into a right mess. But as I say, much more of a slow-paced kind of character study into this guy's kind of descent into madness, not the sort of in-your-face, lurid, axe-to-the-face kind of film that this cover portrays. Again, another very interesting film. I think this one's a Spanish film, and it has a very kind of desolate look and feel to it. So again, it presents quite an interesting atmosphere and mood to it, which, like I say, with Axe is different from what the video nasty label kind of suggests. I think probably the trouble with Cannibal Man is that at the time, anything with cannibal in the title was immediately seized because of the notoriety of Cannibal Holocaust. So that title and images like this would have immediately got it removed from the shelves. But like I say, there's a lot more going on to this film than just mindless cannibal violence, and it's nothing to do with the Italian jungle cannibal movies either. It's nothing like that. So that's Cannibal Man. Okay, the next movie on the list is The Funhouse, and yeah, this one I've never quite understood why this one was on the list. The Funhouse to me is nothing special. It's just a kind of a generic slasher film, but therein kind of lies the question of why the British authorities took issue with this and not any of the other kind of generic slasher films that were coming out at the time, a lot of which, quite frankly, were more violent than The Funhouse. Another interesting thing as well is that this was released by Universal, and they didn't really often come after the larger studios. They went after the more independent companies who either couldn't fight back or just didn't care really. But yeah, they didn't very often kind of pull big studio movies. They tend to have the muscle to kind of fight back, but they did, and the Funhouse was one of the films that was banned in England. On speculation, the only thing I can kind of think of is because it was directed by Toby Hooper, who was infamous for directing the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But then the strange thing is, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre wasn't on the initial Video Nasties list. So yeah, who knows? But the Funhouse has always been a strange one as to why that was on the list. Okay, number 2 on my list is The House by the Cemetery. So Lucio Fulci, he has I think 3 films on the Video Nasties list. Now the other 2 films, Zombie Flesh Eaters and The Beyond, you can kind of see why they made the list. They're very gory and things like that. But House by the Cemetery has always struck me as a Lucio Fulci film that's not really about the gore, it's more about the atmosphere. The family move into this house by the cemetery, and it's got sort of like that weird scientist guy in the basement, but it's more kind of what you don't see really. It does deliver on the gore. There is some of that in this film, but it's never struck me as sort of in your face gory as other Lucio Fulci films. So yeah, I'm not sure what it was about this one that got it on the list. It doesn't really have that much of a suggestive title either. But I think out of all of Fulci's films, this one doesn't really deserve that kind of Video Nasties label, because it did focus on other things and wasn't all that heavy on the gore like all of his others were. So yeah, I always thought this one had a bit more to it than that, but it was snatched up unfortunately and removed from shelves. And then the number 1 movie on my list of films that didn't deserve the Video Nasties label is Dead and Buried. And I think out of all the films on the list, Dead and Buried to me is the one that stands out the most as being kind of a cut above what the Video Nasties were. Like I say, a lot of the films on the list were very trashy, very kind of exploitation sort of style. But Dead and Buried has a very, very classy and glossy feel to it. It's a very well made and put together film. It does deliver on the violence, don't get me wrong, there's some very violent and quite disturbing scenes in Dead and Buried. The scenes of the seemingly normal townsfolk ganging up on people and killing them are quite hard going. But it's a very, as I say, a very well put together and directed film. It kind of has a feel of sort of like a 50s kind of sort of urban paranoia going on, and then like the 80s slasher elements thrown in as well. But it's, as I say, it's a very special film, I think, Dead and Buried. Very underrated. And yeah, the best way I can say it is it has that kind of glossy look and feel to it, which is very, very lacking in the Video Nasties kind of ilk. Which for me sets it apart from any film on the list. And it's very unusual as to why this one did actually make the list. I suggest it was probably, like I say, the aforementioned violence of regular people killing people. There's also a scene with a syringe put in somebody's eye, which I imagine would have freaked the censors out no end. But yeah, this one was removed from UK shelves and banned. So there you go, guys. That's 5 films that I don't think deserve the label of Video Nasty. Let me know what you think of this list. Let me know of any other films on the list that you always kind of pondered as to why it was a Video Nasty. Thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for more videos.